Today is the first day of the year of our Lord, 2017. My guess is that for some of us, that hardly seems possible. Wasn't it just yesterday when we were in a tizzy over Y2K and the beginning of a new millennium? On the other hand, that seems like a lifetime ago. Besides, according to the ballyhooed Mayan calendar, the world should have ended December 21st, 2012. And according to Hal Lindsey and the late great Planet Earth, and numerous Left Behind books by Tim LaHaye and Jerry Jenkins, we should have all been raptured by now. So what are we doing, getting ready to celebrate the year 2017? I hope we're approaching the new year with a positive attitude. It is said that Christopher Columbus kept a diary on his way to the New World. It was not an easy voyage. The men were on the verge of mutiny. Many of them wanted to turn around. Yet every day, the last entry that he would write in his log was, "Today we moved westward." I hope that you were able to write in your journal each day this past year, "I moved forward." Though it hasn't been an easy year, and some of us have had quite a difficult year, we can still move forward, if not physically or financially, at least mentally and spiritually. And with God's help, 2017 will be our best year yet. And that is my prayer for each of you. With the changing of the year, let's talk for a moment about time. The older we get, the faster time seems to fly. When you are 4 or 5 years of age, time moves slowly. There are 358 days until next Christmas, an eternity when you are a child. When you are 60, 70, or 80, a year seems like no time at all. Another Christmas will be here before we know it. In fact, every year we decorate earlier and earlier. In fact, I see decorations for Christmas out already. It was Albert Einstein who introduced us to the idea that time is relative. Sometimes his theory of relativity has been reduced to the example of a young man sitting with a nice girl for 2 hours. He thinks it's only a minute. But when he sits on a hot stove for 1 minute, he thinks it's 2 hours. Now, that's not exactly what Einstein meant, but he did show us that time is relative. According to his theory, as I understand it at least, if we could travel at a velocity approaching the speed of light, time would slow down. What do I mean by slowing down? Someone has given this example. An astronaut launched at high speed into space will return measurably younger than his twin brother who was left at home. That may sound appealing to those of us who want to be younger. Of course, you have to launch yourself into outer space to experience this phenomenon. Someone turned this idea into a limerick. There once was a girl named Miss Bright who could travel much faster than light. She departed one day in an Einsteinian way and came back on the previous night. The unknown author of that limerick may have taken a little poetic license, but it captures the general idea. Another scientist who has written extensively on time is Stephen Hawking, the brilliant physicist. In fact, he wrote a book entitled A Brief History of Time. It amuses me that Hawking, an amazing intellect, is an avid fan of the cartoon show The Simpsons, and has even made appearances on the show. He likes to attend table readings of The Simpsons, the cartoon equivalent of a dress rehearsal. One day, Hawking was upwards of 30 minutes late to the rehearsal. As the other actors were sitting around waiting for him, one of the actors looked at his watch and quipped, "Does the man have no concept of time?" Well, obviously he does have a concept of time. He literally wrote the book on the subject. For most of us, however, the passage of time is a mysterious affair which we will never fully comprehend. Has anyone ever attended a time management seminar? The title suggests that we can manage time. These workshops on time management are generally known by different names nowadays, such as managing multiple priorities. That is because someone finally figured out that time is not really something we can manage. All we can hope to do is manage our priorities within the time we have been given. How successfully we manage these priorities determines to a great extent how successful we are in life. The Bible has something to say about time management. In Psalm 90, verse 12, we read these words, "Lord, teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts to wisdom." Now that's a good memory verse for a new year. Our lesson for the day from Paul's letter to the church in Galatia speaks of time. Not the passage of time, or the relativity of time, or even the management of time. In his letter, Paul speaks of the fulfillment of time. He writes, "But when the set time had fully come, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, that we might receive adoption to sonship. Because you are his sons, God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, the Spirit who calls out, 'Abba, Father.' So you are no longer a slave, but God's child. And since you are his child, God has made you also an heir." What an important message. When the set time fully arrived, some of us prefer the King James version of this phrase, when the fullness of time was come. But both versions are basically saying, when the time God had chosen had arrived, God sent Christ into the world. Christ came at the right time, the perfect time in human history. God had already been at work for thousands of years, bringing about just the right conditions for his birth. The prophets had testified to the Jewish people that out of David's line a Savior would be born, and of his kingdom there would be no end. When the Savior was born, Jews were scattered throughout the known world. In every major city, there was a synagogue, and this was the first place the early Christian evangelists went to proclaim the new faith. It is clear biblically that there was no other faith than the Jewish faith from which Christianity could have originated. The stage was also set culturally. About 300 years before Christ, a son was born to a Macedonian king named Philip. The son was called Alexander. We know him as Alexander the Great. It took Alexander only 12 years to conquer the known world of his time. He spread the Greek language over most of the Western civilized world. Greek became the international language by which the gospel could be communicated. In the Gospels themselves, and particularly in the writings of Paul, we can see the influences of Greek philosophy and thought. Greek culture broke down some of the barriers of nationalism. The influence of Alexander helped pave the way for the coming of Christ. And then came the great Roman Empire. The Romans furnished a system of law which made it possible for the gospel to grow in relative stability. Not long before Christ's birth, Julius Caesar built roads that made commerce possible over all the empire. These roads facilitated travel by the first Christian missionaries. Christ's birth came at the perfect time. But when the set time had fully come, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, that we might receive adoption to sonship. Notice why Christ came, that we might become sons and daughters of God. What a great message for a beginning of a new year. Because of Jesus, we are now the sons and daughters of God. What does that say to you? What does that mean to you? I have to confess that it is difficult for me to think of myself as a son of God. I suspect that is because I don't want to sound like I am on the same level as Christ. He is the unique Son of God. I can think of myself easily as a child of God. That seems humble enough. But Son of God? That's difficult. Indeed, we lock people up for claiming to be Jesus, right? There's a famous story about a man that psychologist Richard Bandler was working with who claimed to be Jesus. Bandler asked him, "Are you Jesus?" The man answered, "Yes, my son." Bandler said, "I'll be right back." This left the man a little bit confused. Within 3 or 4 minutes, Bandler came back holding a measuring tape. Asking the man to hold out his arms, Bandler measured the length of his arms and his height, head to toe. After that, Bandler left. The man claiming to be Christ became a little concerned. A little while later, Bandler came back with a hammer, some large spiked nails, and a set of boards. He began to pound them together into the form of a cross. The man asked, "What are you doing?" Bandler asked, "Are you Jesus?" Again the man said, "Yes, my son." Bandler said, "Then you know why I'm here and what I am doing." Suddenly a wave of recognition swept across the patient's face. He stepped back and shouted, No, I'm not Jesus. I'm not Jesus." Saying that we are the children of God is no problem, but saying that we are sons and daughters of God may be problematic for some of us. Of course, we're not claiming to be on Christ's level, but neither are we worms of the dust. We are God's elect, to use another term that Paul used to describe us. We need to see ourselves as God sees us. It would make a difference in this new year in how we live our lives. We are sons and daughters of the King of Kings. In 2006, ABC News carried a fascinating story about a young woman named Sarah Culberson. Adopted 2 days before her first birthday, Sarah grew up the youngest daughter in a close-knit family in Morgantown, West Virginia. Sarah was surrounded by love in her home, but she also wondered about her roots. Like many adopted children, she wanted to learn about her birth parents. At age 22, she decided to begin the search. She quickly learned that her mom had died a dozen years earlier from cancer. Sarah was crushed. A few years later, a private investigator helped her locate her birth father, along with an unbelievable surprise. Sarah wasn't an average suburban girl. Sarah was a princess. Her father, a ruling member of the Mende tribe in Bumpy, Sierra Leone, was living in Africa. By birthright, Sarah was royalty. She could one day be known as paramount chief in a country she's never even seen. Talking with ABC's Robin Roberts on Good Morning America, Sarah said it took a while to process the shock of discovering her biological dad. For one thing, it took a couple of years to kind of deal with finding my father and having 2 dads, she said. Her African father invited her to come to Africa to meet her family there. When she arrived in Sierra Leone, the entire Bumpy community came out to welcome its princess, a happy homecoming for the American girl who never knew that by searching for her birth parents, she'd find the meaning of her own identity. They were amazing, Sarah says, remembering her first impression of the Bumpy people. There were about 200 to 300 people there to welcome me. They were singing and dancing, and I was like, what did I do to deserve this? While she found Sierra Leone beautiful and exciting, it was also heartbreaking. Sarah saw people suffering from a horrible civil war, and she wanted to help. She started a nonprofit foundation to assist the Bumpy people. Sarah says her West Virginia family, who could have resented her search for her birth parents, has stuck by her through her discovery. They're like angels, Sarah says. They said that they would support her in whatever she wanted to do. She cautions other adoptees who try to find their biological parents that they should not go into their search expecting anything. I had no expectations. I didn't even know if I'd get a return phone call, she says. Sarah's search, however, resulted in a new life and a new mission, helping the bumpy people in Sierra Leone. For her, being a princess means doing her part. The title princess means responsibility, she says, and that's what I'm taking on. The title princess does mean responsibility. So does the title son of God or daughter of God. You and I have responsibilities as God's children. But what a gift we have been given. Some of us will remember the scene in The Lion King where Simba, the young lion, is being challenged to go back home and be the king he was born to be. Simba had run from his destiny. The struggle in confronting his mean uncle was just too difficult. But there is a memorable scene that represents a turning point in Simba's life. He looks in the water and sees the subtle reflection of his father, Mufasa, the king. Mufasa says to Simba, "You have forgotten who you are. Look inside yourself, Simba. You are more than what you have become. Remember who you are." That's Paul's message to us as we end one year and begin another. Remember who you are. When the set time had fully come, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, that we might receive adoption to sonship. Because you are his sons and daughters, God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, the Spirit who calls out, "Abba, Father." So you are no longer a slave, but God's child. And since you are his child, God has made you also an heir. Look inside yourself. You are more than you think you are. Because of what Christ has done on your behalf, you are a son or a daughter of the King. That carries with it responsibilities. But what an amazing gift. All we have to do is remember who we are. Will you please pray with me? Holy God, all things are yours. You experience no shortages, no scarcity, no lack or deficiency, and you share your wealth with us. You are generous always, unrestrained in the outpouring of your grace. Your mercy is unending. Your love is relentless. Your compassion is unbounded. You reveal your truth to us. You imprint us with your image. You illumine our lives with the light of your presence. We are as rich as kings, yet far too often we live as paupers. Embolden us to grow into the sons and daughters you have created us to be. By the power of your Spirit who resides within us, for the sake of Christ and his kingdom, we pray. Amen.